Welcome to the Bird's Eye View Sports Edition, and we are here to talk about the one game, the Civil War. That's not called the Civil War anymore, even though it's been called the Civil War for like 100 and some years. Now all of a sudden, woke culture wants to do away with the Civil War because it's offensive. I don't know. Anyway, it's still the Civil War. It always will be the Civil War. But yeah. So man, so this game had all these implications on it. If Oregon won, they're in the Pac-12 title game. And more importantly, the Civil War is a rivalry game. The two games that Oregon must win is Washington and Oregon State. And looks like the Ducks failed on both of those. They lost to Washington a couple weeks ago. They beat Utah, and then they lost to Oregon State in a game that should have never have been close, but it was. And let's just take a look at the team stats real quick, and don't pay attention to the score. But if you're just talking about this game in general, right? Let's see here. There we go. Oregon has 26 first downs to Oregon State's 19. Third down efficiency, 5 for 14, 3 of 9. Fourth down, 0 for 5, and 1 for 2. And that's a super telling stat, that 0 for 5. We'll talk about that later. But 470 yards to 328. Passing yards, 327 to 60. 8 yards per pass against 4.2. Oregon State has 2 interceptions. And then you have 143 rushing yards to 268 rushing yards, which is another telling stat. Penalties, Oregon had 7 penalties for 58 yards, 3 for 37. And here's the thing is total turnovers, right? Oregon State had 3 turnovers, and the time of possession was 34 minutes for Oregon and 25 minutes for Oregon State. And Oregon's not a possession team, but if you looked at these stats, you're saying that Oregon blew Oregon State out, that this game wasn't even close. But somehow, some way, Oregon managed to lose this game. And if you look at the score, right, it was 7-10, but Oregon had every chance in the world to take the lead. But instead, on fourth down, Dan Lanning, super aggressive, decided not to kick the easy field goals, which would have put you up in the first quarter 13-10. Instead, you go for it and you get stopped. And okay, so here's the thing is you go for it and you get stopped. Okay, maybe that's not something we should do, right? You play the game and you're up 14-10 at the half. Okay, no big deal. You come out in the third quarter and you blow Oregon State out of the water. Like, just blow them out. It's 31-17 at the end of the third quarter. This game is over, right? But no. You go for it on some fourth downs and you don't get it. I think there was 3 or 4 different times that Oregon was down inside the 5 or 6 yard line and could not score on Oregon State. And you're supposed to have the best offensive line in the nation, and you can't get 4 yards into the end zone. That's a problem. That's a serious problem. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But so there was a couple missed fourth down conversions in the fourth quarter, and then Oregon muffs a punt right at their end zone, and all of a sudden Oregon State scores 21 points to take the lead and win, right? So Oregon had the ball at the goal line again with like 3 minutes left and went for it on fourth down, a pass play on fourth down, by the way, and couldn't score. Now, they tried to run it in early, and I don't want to play too much of second guessing, but the thing is in the first half, if you learned that you couldn't run the ball in on Oregon State at the goal line twice, then maybe in the fourth quarter, you stick to just passing, right? Leaking the tight ends and doing things like that to get yourself in. In this game, I don't think this game was very well called. Yes, I know Nix is hobbled, but I think this game wasn't being concentrated on by the offense. And we'll get to that in just a second. So, Bo Nix, Bo Nix was fine, right? He is 27 for 41, not great on the percentage there, but he still had 327 in passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And then if you look at the opposing QB, 6 of 13, 60 yards and 2 interceptions. Okay, why aren't you putting 10 people in the box and make him throw? Because they weren't going to do anything. Look at this guy. 15 carries for 103 yards. That's ridiculous. Right? That is just a ridiculous stat. So here's the thing is Oregon outplayed Oregon State all game until the fourth quarter. And then it all came crashing down and Oregon couldn't do anything. And I don't want to go too much blame game stuff on here, but to me, it really felt like a young coach making mistakes, right? Because I understand you want to be aggressive, but as we've talked about in previous games, there's a time to be aggressive and there's time to just take the points. If they had taken the 2 field goals early, they still win this game. Right? They still win this game by 2 points. But because they didn't do that, they gave up points, they left points on the board. Later, that came back to haunt him. And that's another lesson that Dan Lanning must learn. I know he was the youngest coach. We'll get to that in just a second. But you have to take points when they're there. There's times to be aggressive. And, okay, the first time you did it, I'm okay with that. You were trying to prove a point that your team could just punch it in, and okay. But the second time, you say, okay, we got stopped the first time. Let's just go ahead and take the points the second time, right? Because then it's 37-38 at the end of the game. And instead of going for it on fourth down because you had to have a touchdown, you could have kicked the field goal and still won by 1 point. Or still won by 2 points. Whatever. So this is where that problem of being aggressive is a very fine line, and Dan Lanning is on the wrong side of that right now. And I don't mind, like I said, I don't mind being aggressive in some points. I don't mind you going for fourth downs when you're on the 40. I don't mind you going for fourth down once in a while at the goal line to try to get it in. But when the game starts to flip, that's where you run into those missed points. And that's a lesson that Dan Lanning missed on this game, and I hope he learns that lesson. But another loss to a team that Oregon should have beat. They should have beat Washington, but they let them come back. They should have beat Oregon State. They let them come back. Dan Lanning is great in the second and third quarter, but they fail on first and fourth quarter, and that's kind of a problem right now. Now, this is Dan Lanning's first year as a head coach, so okay. This is Dan Lanning's first year with these players, and they have to build on that. But the problem is next year is up in the wind because for another year in a row, Oregon has to replace their offense. Kenny Dillingham, Oregon offensive coordinator, becomes youngest coach in the Power 5 because he is now going to coach Arizona State. So here's the problem, right? Is is not only does your offensive go, which means now you have to wonder about Bo Nix. Is Bo Nix going to leave because the guy that made Bo Nix great is no longer going to be there? And then Dante Moore, the number one or two recruit QB in the nation, being recruited by Kenny Dillingham, that was committed to Oregon, is now there's talk that he's going to go to Michigan State, or he may possibly follow Dillingham down to Arizona State, right? So you lose your next protege quarterback. And if Bo Nix leaves because it's another offensive coordinator come in, and that's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. There's been no consistency in the Oregon coaching regime, and that's a very, very, very big problem in college football. So now Dan Lanning has to scramble to find somebody that can equal or surpass Kenny Dillingham's offense. And where are you going to go? This will be very, 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 very important hire, and it has to be quick. Has to be very quick to maintain the offensive players that you've already recruited to come to your school, because they may decide that, well, there's too much up in the air, or the fact that I was going to go play for Kenny Dillingham and now he's gone. So Dan Lanning is in trouble in his first year of coaching because he's made some mistakes, lost 2 games he shouldn't have lost, won some games maybe he wasn't supposed to. Dan Lanning had a successful first year. I'm not saying that he didn't. He had a successful first year. It could have been better, but now he's in trouble again because now he has to hire another coach to come in and not upset his recruiting class and not upset the offense, because now you have to hire a coach with a very similar offense that can maintain and not change too much of the players that you already have. And what you may see is a bunch of transfers out of Oregon again. The offense, a bunch of offensive transfers, and you may see a bunch of decommitments on the offense. And so more bad news for Oregon. If you're an Oregon fan, this is not what you wanted to see. I was really hoping that Kenny in his first year would decide, as much as I really want to do that, I need to stay a couple more years and get some more coaching experience. But with that, he has left for the Sun Devils, which sucks because that means he's still in the Pac-12, which is not something that you really wanted to see. You'd rather him go somewhere else. But, so, sorry, Oregon fans, but some more change is coming our way. And as much as we hate to see it, it's going to be inevitable. But we'll see if Dan Lanning can make a splash higher and keep those offensive players that they have recruited so far. But with that, horrible loss to Oregon State. That game was won at halftime. That game was won again at the end of the third quarter. But mistakes, coaching mistakes, player mistakes, and that happens in rivalry games. Oregon State is never a pushover. Even if Oregon was favored by 100 points, this game would always be close. So there's always next year, but my hat's off to Oregon State. I forgot what their coach's name is, their old quarterback. But he's done a great job there getting this team playing, And what can I say? They took down the number 9 team in the nation. They should have beat USC earlier in the year at home. But Oregon falters in the end and goes 9-3, matches Oregon State's 9-3, which means I think they have the tiebreaker, which I don't even know. Where does that put Oregon in the Pac-12 standings? I have no idea here. Let's take a gander. What are we doing here? Standings. Pac-12. Oh, okay. So overall, Oregon's still number 3 in the Pac-12 standings. They're at 9-3. But look at this. You have Arizona that barely missed bowl eligibility, just barely, and that's significant because they've been a doormat team lately. But you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams going to bowls for the Pac-12. That's very good. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 teams at 9-3. No team was ever going to go undefeated in the Pac-12. That hasn't happened ever, and since they expanded to 12 teams. Looks like USC has a very, very, very good chance to represent the Pac-12 in the playoff, especially with the shakeup that happened with Ohio State getting blown out. You had some other teams losing up there. So I think you got Georgia, TCU. Probably if the Trojans went out, you have them, and then I don't know. I mean, you might put Ohio State in that last spot, but I don't know. So, all right, with that though, we're out of here. We still got the bowl game, so we'll probably stick around for that. But much love all. We are out.